want to be a platform that athletes can turn to educate in this space. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on us as a company as well to make sure that we're not just creating great products, but we're finding ways to actually educate. And that comes through, through content, through the way that we can speak to our audiences as well. And for me, that's the ultimate goal. I want us to essentially change the mindset for athletes. And with that it's a pretty bold statement. But as we've said, I think there is something really, really close to my heart about trying to get, allowing people to have the possibility to do what they love doing for much longer. Yeah, and I think it's a unique space in nutrition because no one has thought, about really thinking about athletes who love doing what they want to do and potentially continue to do that well later into life, continue to do it with their children or their partners. We all know endurance sports is a lifestyle. So if we can play a part in that, in changing the mindset of an athlete very early on in their careers and then be able to allow them to do it for much longer, that is the goal. And I know there's 1,000 steps in between that.
Welcome to the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. We are Jess and BJ, and this is the place where we share stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose. Today's guest is Damien Fitzpatrick, founder and CEO of Pillar Performance, a sports micronutrient company based in Australia. Damien and his team at Pillar are filling a gap between traditional sports supplements and pharmaceutical intervention to keep athletes doing what they love longer into their lives. And we love that. And of course, we also love the vegan tab on their website, recognizing the growing population of athletes choosing to no longer eat animal-based products as a means to perform well. But what we love even more and what we are committed to sharing is the story behind the product, the series of events that led to the creation of Pillar Performance, and the chance meeting that initiated this and many of the 360-something podcasts that precede this one. Indeed, this happens when you follow your heart, learn from your pain, and live life purposefully. The universe will conspire to support you and bring you the people that align with what you offer in the world. And this happened just a few weeks ago at Ironman 70.3 Oceanside when we met Damien. Within minutes, I think we talked for about 2.5 minutes total. I just knew that he had a story we wanted to share. And after trying the Pillar Performance product that night, it was evident that we needed to get him on the show. Damien is a former professional athlete, well known for his injuries, which became a growing challenge that ultimately guided him to where he sits today, and no doubt fuels his passion for supporting athletes' longevity in sport. That said, I'm going to leave that story for Damien to share, and if you've listened to this podcast before, then you know that we are going to dig in from there. So Damien Fitzpatrick, welcome to the show. It's so good to see you again.
Jess, BJ, thank you very much for having me and that nice intro. I very much appreciate it. And yeah, I totally agree. A very chance meeting and a very brief, but I would say, very meaningful conversation has led to this, and I'm really, really glad to be here.
Yeah, it was really funny. BJ and I were driving over to Oceanside that day to pick up our packets and walk the expo, and we were saying, geez, it's going to be so weird not to see Mike Riley here, because he's a local and, he was the big voice of Ironman for so many years, and we just figured he wasn't going to be there. And out from under this tent, hey guys, and there's Mike Riley. And now within minutes, he tells us his story about how he's been using Pillar Performance and that to a point now he feels lazy because he's sleeping longer and better than he has in decades. And so then as we're cruising around, then I see you, have no idea that you're the CEO and founder. We have like a 2-minute conversation and I'm about to walk away and you're like, hey, wait, tell me about Yogi Triathlete. And then it just, this conversation comes from those few moments. And I love how it all plays out.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about Expo life, isn't it? It's a melting pot of people, and I think when Mike arrived that day, it was honestly it was like having Michael Jordan walk through. I mean, I've seen there was one time he actually came back. Like, I think he misses the sport clearly. He goes, I'm going to come through one day, and then he actually came back the next day, and I think it was his way of just being attached to the sport. But I'll tell you what, he came through at the same time that the pros walked back from the pro briefing. and there was more selfies with Mike than there were with the pros, and I don't think some of them would mind me saying that. It was really interesting for me to see that nostalgia, what people are obviously holding for him, and for particularly those people and those athletes that were racing for the first time and potentially not having the experience of Mike's voice there. They really wanted to obviously have him have a photo and be part of their race.
Yeah, he's a good dude. We've been really blessed to get to know him over the years and have him call us across many, many finish lines, even before we knew him personally. And he's a great dude.
Yeah, I think that was the first American or North American race. He was not going to be calling people over, and he was even hesitant when we had him on the podcast to even come up and be in that environment. But I'm so glad he did. He's such a staple and such a big piece of the sport. So it was good to see him up there, and then to tell us about the Pillar Performance, which I've heard about you through How They Train podcasts. I know he's a big supporter of Pillar Performance and mentions it a lot. And he's been using it long before, in the early days, I believe. But yeah, so let's dive in. So how did this all start? What's your background? How'd you get here?
It's an interesting one. My background, we've obviously landed in the world of triathlon and endurance sports, but my background, as you can tell probably from my size, mind you, I've lost a little bit of weight since my professional career. I was a professional rugby union player. And I was a professional for just on 12 to 13 years. And I was signed on my first full-time contract straight out of high school. And that is the same age as it is in North America, 18. So I went straight out of high school and straight into professional rugby union. And rugby union, in the positions that I was playing, is, you needed to be anywhere between 250 pounds, in the guys at the very international level. And then there are some guys in a position that's very close to mine that are, some of them are getting into the 300 pounds. So you're talking very, very big guys. So as you can imagine, aerobically, physiologically, very different systems to endurance athletes. But as Jess kindly touched on, and I really do own it now, I think originally as athletes in your career, when you get branded as that guy that was injured, you do take it personally a little bit, but I kind of now wear it as a badge of honor because of where it's been able to take me into this venture. But one of the things that had led me down this path was obviously that injury history. So I had a very unique case in the middle of my career where I had 3 subsequent ACL ruptures and ACL reconstructions, but back to back, with minimal to no contact involved. So obviously an ACL is a pretty strong ligament, and usually it takes quite a high or heavy impact to affect it. I unfortunately had an instance where I had the first 2 happen in Australia while I was playing here in Australia. And then I actually ventured over to Europe to find a surgeon to look into what was going on, because I was 24 years old at the time. And a lot of things didn't make sense to a lot of the medical staff that were dealing with the case. Because the fact that the matter was that I was healthy, I was literally going into the prime of my career. And the circumstances in which the graft was breaking just didn't really make sense to anyone. So we ended up going over to France to find a surgeon who uncovered probably the root cause of the entire issue, and that was the fact that I had a tibial slope that was slightly bent. So I had an increased angle on my tibia, which meant one of my tibias was bent. And this was just from birth. It was something that no one could hope. You can't do anything about. So when he gave me this news, I said, "Oh, okay. Well, it's been fun while it lasted, but I suppose that means I'm retiring because essentially I can't play contact sport with that degree of bend in my knee in my tibia because it's going to put too much strain." He described my ACL being like a really tight guitar string. He goes, because we have to move it that extra 8% across your knee. He said, essentially any slight variation off the pivot point is going to break the ACL. And I said, okay. And I was now, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm now in a foreign country trying to piece together English and French and it was a situation where he said, but I think I could fix the problem. And I said, okay, wow, like that's interesting. He said, yeah, I've actually done a surgery on a professional soccer player in Europe. It was a guy from the Tottenham Hotspurs, which is a big English Premier League team, who had exactly the same issue. Now, this surgeon in France was a brilliant surgeon, and he goes, look, I did a procedure on this guy called what's called a tibial osteotomy, which meant that he was going to break my tibia in half, remove it like a piece of the tibia, and then essentially what it does is you take a wedge out and it straightens the leg back up, which would then mean that it would be straightened. Then he'll be able to in the same surgery, he was going to then reconstruct the ACL again. He also then took like 1/3 of my ITB down the thigh muscle, and he to make it extra tight, he took a piece of that and wrapped it around the front of my knee, which is called a Macintosh loop. And he was describing this surgery to me, what he wanted to do. And I'm there trying to piece together French. My French at that time is not amazing, and I'm like, yeah, great, let's do that. That sounds fantastic. Had I probably known what I was going to go through afterwards, maybe I'd have second thoughts. I remember calling my parents. I was only 24 at the time, calling my parents who were back in Australia, and I said, oh, no, there's a surgeon here who thinks he can fix it, and then there's a French team here that wants to sign me for another 2 years and pay for the surgery and the rehab, which I was really lucky about as well. And I said, so I'm gonna give it a go. And so it sent me on this big journey. Essentially, long story short, the surgery was successful. I was able to get another 6 years out of the back end of my professional career. My knee probably got back to maybe 70%. Obviously, after a surgery like that, you can imagine that it's never going to be 100%. I've also got like a 12-centimeter plate that sits on the front of my tibia now, holding everything together. But I managed to scrape together 5 more years of my career, which I'm really thankful for. But what happened was it left my leg in my knee in a really compromised position, because after all these ACLs, I literally had no cartilage left, which was really problematic, obviously. And what that meant was when I was now having to do heavy leg weights, because in my position you had to have a lot of absolute strength, which meant strength training was really important. So during the season, or even pre-season, for example, we'd be doing a lot of running, because aerobically you have to, even in the bigger positions in rugby, aerobically you have to get through 80 minutes of running as well. And you have to carry a lot of weight. So the fact that I was having to do heavy leg strength and then into, quite back to back heavy running days as well, I would just wake up and my knee would just be in such a bad position that I did what many professional athletes continue to do, which is not great. And I turned to kind of, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. And I was, taking those the beginning of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just so I could get through training. Because in professional rugby, if you don't train, it's very rare that you'll get selected to play. If you don't get selected to play, you don't get paid, you don't get a contract. Everyone knows the story of professional sport. And so I was taking a lot of these anti-inflammatories. The medical team at the time in my Australian team here, I was getting older and I was very close with the medical team, and the doctor said, look, Damien, I'm getting concerned, I'm getting concerned about, the long-term effects on all these anti-inflammatories on your stomach lining. We need to start to work on other solutions. And I said, look, well, you need to find me another solution, because like any athlete, I was so dedicated to what I was doing. I said, guys, like, if you don't find me a solution, these are keeping me on the field and getting me paid. I said, like, if you don't provide me with they're only anti-inflammatories, like, we're not talking, they're not illegal drugs. I said, guys, I could just go down to my local GP and get them as well. So that's when we that was the exact situation that started me on this big deep dive of this world of complementary medicine, which is the broader terminology of the category. We've really dialed it into the idea of micronutrition, but we started to look for natural alternatives to inflammation, and that is really where the passion started. Even though right now the hero product of the brand is without a doubt our triple magnesium, but the whole venture into this space, into the non-macro side of performance, started then and there when I was trying to look for alternative natural forms of anti-inflammatories. We started to look in high strength curcumins, high strength omegas, with ratio of EPA. And what we really quickly discovered was that we couldn't find anything that was actually specifically for athletes, something that would actually match the sports science, where I was going home and reading because I needed to know exactly what I was taking, because if I was going to take that, not the anti-inflammatories, I needed to make sure I was going to be taking something strong enough. And yeah, what ended up happening was we ended up, long story, we ended up sitting with a lot of the companies because a lot of the products that were being presented to me were not up to scratch. And these were even the practitioner brands, the ones that you were getting prescribed to people. They weren't up to scratch. What I found out, having sat with these companies, which is another blessing as an athlete, I think when you write in on LinkedIn, you say, hi, myself and our head of medicine would love to come and have a chat about your products. That everyone's like, yeah, come and have a chat. And it was actually some of these conversations which really gave me the path and the route to, and probably showed me the global gap in the market for Pillar, because they told us that this category of micronutrition or preventative health or wellness, as we've always coined it, and it's really interesting. And I'm not going to, I'm not being drunk, but what they do is they told us, and numerous companies told us this, they target 55-year-old plus women. And I went, okay, that's really interesting. Like, it's a really specific demographic. And they said, no, we target 55-year-old plus women for two reasons. Because they are the most aware of what they need. They are at that age where they're also now purchasing these products on behalf of their husband, who won't purchase them for themselves. And the 55-year-old mark, they believe, was around the time when their teenage children would hit the age where they could also start to purchase on behalf of teenage children. So a lot of the brands actually formulated and targeted everything regarding that demographic. And that just wasn't in Australia, that was globally. And that was the aha moment for me. I sat there. I had by that stage, we had a group of dietitians across Australia who were also really keen to work out why we couldn't find products for athletes. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting very close with Pip Taylor, who was at the time, she's a very, very accredited sports dietitian here in Australia. She was working as the head of nutrition for the AFL, but also a big team in Queensland in our Australian Football League here. We got together. She came on the journey and said, look, this is definitely a space I think needs to be uncovered. And I'd love to come on the journey. And we'll get into the products later, but what Pip ended up saying was, she said, Damien, I know you and I are both right now, we're in team sports, we're in, football contact. She goes, but I guarantee you the space lies in the broader market for endurance athletes. Because there is not one, and you guys would totally attest to this, there is not one I think anyone who knows, who is doing triathlon has not had an injury experience as part of that journey. It is just part and parcel. And the injury experience also comes on the back of deep knowledge on what the body needs. And so she was saying, Damien, I think when we launch these products, because of the technicality in them, because they are essentially more pharmaceutical than they are sports supplement, she believed that endurance athletes were going to be the ones that were going to come over the brand immediately. And since when we launched literally nearly 20 months ago now, the first product went live. The first bunch, we had all the professional teams already signed up. We literally have now 55 professional franchises using the products, but our core demographic of customers is all endurance athletes, which is really cool. But that was the story. That's how the genesis of the brand started. And there's obviously months of R&D and things in there. But I ended up retiring in 2020 and knew that this is what I was going to do. And we went out and raised venture capital and got started.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, I see so many parallels. And I know you probably see the same thing. This desire to find a solution to keep going, right? Like I too, I had ACL repair back in the 80s. I didn't have the tibia slant, so it took me one. And it's been good since, but I understand that struggle of trying to do anything possible to get back into the sport, to get yourself back out there. Before that, what was growing up like? Just to take a snapshot of, was that desire strong to pursue anything, like one pointed focus, like I'm going to figure this thing out, and this is how I'm going to do it?
Yeah, I think definitely. No, I think people often, they're quite humble when that question gets asked. I think if you spoke to my parents, they would be like, out of all my siblings, they were like, if anyone was going to, get into this mindset of I'm doing this thing and going for it, it was probably me. I grew up, had a really lovely childhood, typical Australian family, very outdoorsy. Grew up swimming, playing all types of sports. Probably I was in my summer. In summer, I loved swimming, and I was on the path to try and do that competitively. But it was probably around the age of kind of 12, 13 where my size just. And I think the swimming coach at my high school, I think I came back after the first summer of high school, and I went to a high school that was very prominent in rugby. And I think I came back to the swimming squad, and that was also a boarding school. But I came back to the swimming squad, I think that summer to train. And I must have just gotten so big. And I think the swimming coach must have said to my parents, I think we've got a decision to make here. If he is to try, and I was a sprinter in swimming, but they said if he is to try and do this, we're going to need to. There's probably got to be a line in the sand moment. And Mum and Dad said to me, well, what is it? And I said, at the time I was just like, yeah, I mean, team sports or swimming. I was like, nah, I'm going to do rugby, and then that was kind of it. But yeah, I was always very driven. I was definitely one of those people. Yeah, I think over talent during even my professional career, I think a lot of my teammates and coaches would probably say I had a lot more work ethic than talent, and I'm proud to say that in a way. And so, I was always the guy that was looking to do things outside of rugby as well. I was pretty balanced in the way that because I think I was so injured in the middle of my career. I went and did economics degrees. I've done an MBA. Like, I did all of that during my career because purely I was always on a knife's edge whether this was going to be something long term, and I knew life was going to be outside of that. So I've always been kind of the person that if I set myself to do something, I'm able to do it just purely because I understand what it takes, and work ethic from my parents came really naturally as well. My parents were very, very hard workers, and that instilled a lot in me as well.
Yeah, you got to keep going, and it's very clear that, the path of injury and the quest to find healing in your own body. And then, of course, how it all has landed you where you are today with this company that's helping other people stay in the sport longer. And as somebody who's 51 now, and Beach just turned 50 this year, like, yes, I have no plans of stopping anytime soon, but I also know that, my body has, almost 20 years of endurance sports on it at this point. And although I feel really amazing, first thing in the morning, it's pretty interesting getting down the stairs until I do that mobility on the mat, and get it moving. So you retired not that long ago. It was like 2020. So just about 3 years ago now, and moving into the business. And I know I've heard a little story about the timing of when you launched the business. And I'm assuming that timing with, the shutdown in 2020, that required that drive to come up and say, okay, we've got to find a way to get this product out to the masses with, not being able to be in person with people or travel. How did that all play out with the launch of the business?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So, 2020, I retired. Let's get the years straight. I retired in the middle of 2020. The interesting thing was COVID actually shut down the professional rugby season across the world, and I actually decided to retire then. I was going to retire at the end of the year, but because the season pretty much went on hold, I said to the team, guys, look, I've got something pulling me in another direction. I think I'll retire now. So I kind of had quite a strange retirement, little quiet exit out the back of the stage. But then what happened was I knew what the gap was, went through the whole startup incubator, trying to raise capital. We pitched the whole concept, went and formulated the opening ranges of the products. And I suppose the idea, and a lot of people ask where the name of the brand came from. Everyone's like, I love the name of the company. And the name of the company really came about from sitting down, and myself and the dietitian was sitting down, and we kept saying, okay, like, if we were to try and find products that would, clean the corner of every window in terms of what high performance athletes need from a micronutritional perspective, what would they be? And we kept trying to say, no. And then, we'd mention different ingredients. We'd be talking, we were looking at mitochondria. We were looking at all types of things. So I said, no, guys, we've got to have the pillar. Like, what are the pillars and like, what are the foundations? We kept saying this word, and that was the idea. And then eventually, after a while, one of them said it back to me. I said, that's actually the name of the company, guys. And I was like, because we were at the time, we were looking for the pillars of micronutrition for athletes. And that was in 2020. We then were able to raise some capital where obviously we entered into a pharmaceutical category. So the MOQs on production are very high. We have to use pharmaceutical grade manufacturing facilities as well. And that's not cheap. So we did have to get some outside capital in, which we're very lucky enough to do. And our main backer all come from kind of nutraceutical, pharmaceutical backgrounds as well, and believed that this space that we were looking to try and solve, and this, I suppose, the gap and the mission for the brand is, obviously to try and get more athletes to more start lines more often. And if you were to really coin that down, you guys have summed it up perfectly. It's about longevity. It's about being that company within sport that actually puts itself as a mission behind longevity, because protein and carb fueling and hydration is not attached to longevity. You know what I mean? So we say, okay, we're going to consistently attempt to get athletes to start lines, and that's how we're trying to get people to think about what we're doing. Once you get to the start line, you take you take whatever carb gel company you want, you take your hydration, and their job is to get you to the finish line. You know what I mean? And we'll pick it up. We'll pick it up from there again, and then get the athlete back to the start line. And our idea is, because I unfortunately, because of the state of my knee, and this is a fact, I won't be able to run even a half marathon with my son one day, just because my knee is in such a bad condition. I won't be able to do it. But my hope is that we can create products and start to educate on this side of nutrition to allow people to do, like yourselves, to be able to have a 20-year endurance career is more than, is more than, I suppose, a lot of people would be able to do. And I think, because potentially you guys have understood that and do take really good care of your body. But to answer your question, Jess, we launched the brand after a heavy R&D process. The minute and it's really interesting, here in Australia, we work omni-channel, and we actually sell the brand in pharmacy as well, because of the category where it sits. It's a very high-strength product, and all the major pharmacy companies here in Australia onboarded the brand very quickly. Now, the day that the product we were meant to go live on the 1st of June, and we had all our purchase orders, and we're going to go on to kind of 400 shelves, was the same day that the government announced that there'd be a complete lockdown. So that was pretty stressful in terms of, obviously, you've outlaid capital, then you want to get the product onto a shelf so you can then activate all this marketing that you've and education and awareness that you've just been planning for 6 months. And then basically everyone was like, oh, you can deliver the product, but just put all that stuff on hold. So we were sitting there just going, what do we do? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about e-commerce now as well. And because we run bricks and mortar and e-commerce, we were able to start to focus more on the e-commerce side of things. And it was actually in that period where we realized that our customer and the need states that we are solving is so aligned to endurance sports, and particularly that of triathlon as the early adopters of all endurance sports are triathletes. From the learnings that I've had and dealing with a number of brands in this space, triathletes seem to be a very unique and very educated group of people in the fact that they are willing to deep dive to find what they need, purely because of the amount of I suppose, as you guys know, the amount of dedication and time is required to compete long-form triathlon. You really can't leave any stone unturned, and if you do, you're kind of putting a lot of risk on a lot of that other part of your life. If you're doing upwards of 20 hours a week and you are leaving something out, it's really risky. You know what I mean? And it's devastating if there's an injury. So triathletes are the ones that don't leave anything to chance, which is amazing. And I have spent, only now a couple of years in the world of triathlon, and yeah, I'm pretty inspired by talking to people like yourselves and other people, and like the amount of training that people can fit in. Like there is no better demographic of people than compartmentalizing and having this balance. Like triathletes and age group triathletes particularly that are balancing family and full-time jobs are the most phenomenal people I've ever met in my life. Like, and that's almost like I want to fill our company up with them, because I was like, if anyone could work out how to, be productive and in a time slot, it is triathletes.
So Pillar is, I love how you say you're getting people to the start line, right? And then there's so much stuff on the market. There's really great products that are going to get you to the finish line, and then you guys pick up from there. And that really aligns with, our nutrition program here at Yogi Triathlete. We're really focusing on everyday nutrition. We're focusing on the things that set you up for a healthy gut to be able to metabolize all the nutrition you're going to take on race day, right? Like, a lot of the success with nutrition is, what are you bringing to the start line? So the obvious thing is the race nutrition, but it's the space before the starting line and after the finish line, where it sounds like you guys are focusing too. Has that been a stumbling block for trying to get that mindset expanded for athletes? I know it has been for us, trying to get that mindset expanded to say, oh yeah, it's not just what happens between the start and the finish. It's like, I got to take care of myself every night with the magnesium and the Pillar products to support what's going to happen between that start and finish line.
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, it's been the biggest. It is our biggest challenge as a company, having to, as you've said, almost a change. What we are trying to do is create a category. We're trying to create that third discipline of nutrition. If you've got before or during, we're looking to be after. Well, we're actually looking to be before and after. And it's really our job as a company, and we are finding better ways to make this happen. And I'll give you some instances which has actually led that. But as you've said, we are focusing so heavily on what happens before you get to that start line, because everything you do in and around that race does affect that and even not just from a physical output perspective. We all understand that's obvious, but from a nutritional perspective, what you do outside the race can greatly affect how you absorb, use, and even consume your nutrition during the race. And a really unique, and I'll start with the triple magnesium. A really unique one that we try to educate people on is, firstly, when we launched, obviously endurance athletes immediately, they see a powder, they see something, they see a colorful liquid, and they go, wow, that is to be taken during my race. So that was the first problem we had. What we did with that product was we knew that if we were able to solve, we went into the R&D process with the triple magnesium, which is now kind of live in the States. We wanted to solve for two things. We wanted to solve for muscle recovery and sleep. Really, really interestingly, by solving for muscle recovery, you're also able to incorporate cramp into there. But one of the really unique things about magnesium is the fact that if you have cramping issues during the race or during training, for example, taking a magnesium then and there on the spot does absolutely nothing. It's one of those ones where that is the time probably to try and test with, a high strength sodium, even something as high strength as a pickle juice. But for example, magnesium, at the time when you get a cramp, people go, oh, give me, they're calling out to their families, give me some magnesium. It's not going to do anything, unfortunately, then. What you need to do with magnesium for cramping is obviously to make sure it's loaded within the system. So what we wanted to solve with that formula was we needed to create a product that was going to actually be able to solve for muscle recovery and sleep. And those two elements for athletes are actually a bit of a chicken and the egg, because we know if you solve for sleep, you're going to greatly increase the ability to have strong muscle recovery. Now, what we needed to do was find a way to actually, so when we formulated the product and we decided, look, we went and did a lot of research, and we knew that glycinate or bliss glycinate magnesium in North America is the number one magnesium, and that's a magnesium that is bound to glycine. So that's that amino acid that is really, really potent for calmness. It also works really, really synergistically with neurotransmitters in the body, like GABA. That is the reason that form of magnesium is the one that's clinically tested to help put people into a nice state to allow them to get some really solid deep sleep. Now, what we needed to do was take that formulation up as high as possible, because we also knew that the depletion rates for athletes were far greater than sedentary individuals. It's just a fact. You deplete magnesium through a process called lipolysis, which is just a converting of energy into usable energy by the body, and obviously also through sweat and urine. Those three things we know endurance athletes do far greater of. So what we needed to do was take the formula really, really high. So the formulation actually has 1,800 milligrams of activated magnesium in there. But the only downside of that is that when you formulate magnesium at that high, the ingredient is so horribly sour, you cannot. You literally, it's not palatable to eat, which is why everyone has tried to put it into a tablet form. What we also knew was that there was a global pill fatigue with athletes and people in general in this wellness category, that people don't want to be consuming huge amounts of tablets anymore. It's just a fact. And particularly athletes, I knew, being one, that my teammates, they just weren't resonating with the tablet form of particularly magnesium. So we knew that powder was something we had to solve for. We do have a tablet in the formulation as well, because, quite frankly, there is really unique times where tablets are very convenient. But what we had to do was find a way to get the product to that formulation strength, because we weren't going to compromise on the strength. That was matching the sports science, which we were following. But what we need to do is find a way to flavour it. Now, what a lot of the other brands have done is, in the pharmaceutical space, is just tried to add flavouring over the top of this really rancid, sour-tasting magnesium. And they've got this kind of metallic finish, which people, they try once, it tastes like a medicine, because quite frankly, it is a medicine. We've all got to remember that. But the unique thing is then when you do take it, you're not consistent with it, because it's not a taste that you want to be having all the time. We actually thought about it quite differently, and part of the IP of the brand right now that we're going through and patenting at the moment is we actually found an ingredient that was able to neutralise the magnesium taste. We thought about it very uniquely, a little bit like there's an ingredient that's added to perfume called ambergris. If you add ambergris to perfume, it enables to keep it shelf stable a lot longer. So we said during the manufacturing process, we said we need to find a blocking agent that would allow us to not have to add huge amounts of flavouring to the product, would neutralise the magnesium and then allow us to add quite subtle flavouring to it, because we also knew flavour was something that was going to be really important. And we tried for months. We had 90% of the other products already formulated, and we just couldn't solve this until one day we had a breakthrough on it, and it was probably the happiest day that we had in that process, because launching a startup business is there's not a lot of fun in the first couple of years. It's very head down, bum up. But the day that it came through and we tasted the product without the flavouring, we literally said to the manufacturer, we said that's the formula. They said, yeah. It was just this really dull, neutral, almost watery taste, and I said, now this is an opportunity, which is really unique. And so, Jess, to go back to your point, what we had to do then was, when we launched the product, it was great. It was getting this viral following. We did what any brand did, and you want to get your brand name out there. So we actually launched a water bottle with it. And what was the first thing that we saw people starting to do was, I saw that water bottle with the pink berry flavored product in the bike cradle, and I'm just like, oh, and there's everything on the website, this should be used before bed, 60 minutes before bed. Like, we couldn't have made it clearer. And I just saw, and like even at expos, our first expos, even after 6 months, and I said to the company, I said, guys, if we are going to own and change the mindset of athletes, I said, we have to go all in on this, because when you create a category like we're doing with this sports micronutrition, there is such an education curve you need to move people along, which is literally where the genesis for this product, like this shaker here, we've recently just launched one with a feed that kind of has measurements on it as well, and we call this the micro shaker, and nothing special about it at all. It's purely just to show people that, hey, this thing cannot fit in your bike cradle, so it should be used. It's not a protein shaker. We literally launched it to be like, hey, guys, if you want something to mix your magnesium with, mix it in this. and like we've made it so it's not comfortable to run with, or you can't put in your cradle, just so people now start to see. And it is working, because we're seeing people putting this next to their bed at night, and slowly little decisions like that. And when you launch a brand and a company, we've thought about it a lot now, owning that space outside of racing and training.
Well, there's the mentality. I love it. I can speak to this because I am one of these athletes, right? So it must be better if you have it more often and during the times when you feel fatigued and at your wit's end, which is during a race. So you would feel, right? And I think you can agree with this. This is where the confusion is coming in this industry of nutrition. It's
Absolutely.
really confusing.
Yeah, more is better. Yeah,
more is better, but there's such an important process that you're going through, which is this education. It's a rebranding of what nutrition can be. And there's certain times that you should be taking certain things to get the maximum performance from all the training that you're investing in this experience. And, we see it with athletes who are like, well, I'm going to mix goo, and then I'm going to mix Carbo Pro, and then I'm going to add all this sodium. And now the osmolality of the drink is like thrown out because you're just loading your gut with like stuff. So there's this rebranding that needs to happen. And it's so good that and I've heard you talk about this on the podcast, like you're taking lots of input from the people who are using your products and collecting information and then addressing it with solutions exactly to what you're speaking about. It's such an important piece.
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on that as well. You mentioned, and you guys have just got such a dialed in understanding of this nutrition, and particularly within our category, there's probably some really key points to draw out. I think there is in the wellness space and let's call it the supplement space, there is, I believe, for athletes, there is a skepticism that we are also trying to break through with as a company as well. The reason being that I think every athlete in their time has used magnesium, they've used a fish oil or an omega product, and they've had okay results, but probably not really anything groundbreaking enough to stay consistent with. And the main reason for that is the products, as we go back to what I was saying before, the main reason being it's not because they're bad products. It's just the forms of magnesium, the forms of the actives of micronutrients that they were using were not actually the forms that were specifically trying to be used. So, for example, if an athlete was trying to use magnesium for sleep and they were using a magnesium oxide, for example, something that's actually used for a laxative for people, you're not going to have a great result. And unfortunately, and really quite simply, what we do at Pillar is we said, okay, we're going to do three main things. We're going to make sure that we only use the bioavailable versions of all of the forms of micronutrients, because in micronutrition, the pharmaceutical companies can actually synthetically make the ingredients, which creates them to be very slow absorbed. They're much cheaper to make, which is why you'll find them on a lot of your mass grocery stores, kind of Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart, these type of places. And obviously that comes with a price point. We decided to only use the bioavailable versions of these ingredients because they are the ones that are absorbed the fastest. We obviously then needed to put them at a potency level that matched what we knew the output from athletes were going to be. And the third thing was obviously having everything Informed Sport tested, because we've got a lot of professionals that use the brand, but also our sub-elite and even age group athletes as well. They also want to know that there's no contaminants within the ingredients as well. But BJ, what you were saying there about the timing is so unique, because in micronutrition, if you get those elements right, if you get the potency correct, you get the form of micronutrient correct, you then get this third layer is the timing. If you then get the timing correct, the benefits can be just so astronomical. And the most beautiful thing about the launch of the business that we found is once we've showed this to people and they've used the product, and I think the magnesium is the best thing. If anyone looks at kind of the brand or has seen it, you'll see how many people now tag their sleep data, because once they've had the product, there has been this profound tangible result that people are getting from their trackables, whether it's Garmin, kind of Whoop or Oura Ring, even Apple Watch now. And the beautiful thing is, it's because of those three things. We've got the potency right. We've used the bioavailable forms of the formula, and we've also told people to take it 60 minutes before bed. You get all of that stuff right, and it actually is able to do what you want it to do. Now, I'll go back to what, Jess, you were actually saying before. There are other elements and there are other micronutrients that are actually able to help what you're going to do during the race. And we've actually got a product which we'll launch in the US in a couple of months called Ultra B Active. And it's a very high-strength vitamin B complex. Now, the vitamin B family, when you put it at the strength that we've put it, and only across the bioavailable versions of these formulas, this is our second bestseller within endurance sports, because one of the really key things of vitamin B family, apart from kind of like energy production and red cell production, is actually the optimization of carbohydrates. So what you need, what people don't really understand is if you're going into an Ironman race or even a big long session and you are consuming a very high strength, if you're consuming a beta fuel, for example, has 40 grams of carbs, if you're actually not, if your body and your as you've said, your stomach and everything isn't actually optimized to absorb carbohydrates, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. So, and this is probably the next stage of education for our company that we're going to get into, is thinking about nutrition outside of your in-race nutrition and what actually they can do to move together with each other. Like almost priming the body to get the most out of what you're doing in the race as well. And yeah, it's an ongoing task. We're a very, very young company. As we said, we've only been on the market 20 months, but it's been grind and hustle. Just a lot of startups. We're now sold. We have a business in Germany, now selling in North America, and obviously the Australian business. We have distribution markets in Asia as well, in Eastern Europe too. So the brand's growing really quickly, and it just seems like right now that there is a chorus of athletes that do want to understand what this micronutrition can do for them, because I think we're all aware that we all know carbohydrates, sodiums and things. There's a plethora of information out there, but this space is there's a lot of white space in what we're doing here that we're really looking forward to hopefully trying to lead.
Mm-hmm. And I want to hear about your experience at Oceanside. I know that was the first U.S. Ironman that you were at, but within our 2.5-minute conversation, inevitably, of course, meditation came up. And as CEO, founder, the ups and the downs, and launching the business, and the country shuts down, and trying to get the taste right, and all the things that were going on in the formulation of the product. What are the practices that you use to remain and hold steady your own calm, so that you can navigate these highs and these lows and keep going?
Yeah. As you can imagine, things get pretty chaotic very quickly. I've also, in the middle of all that, threw a newborn baby in there as well. So first time parent in there as well. So my wife, she does all the product design of the business as well. So kind of if you like the pillar packaging or anything like that, my wife was she was instrumental in that process. So during the first year, she was fully pregnant. We had a small team, and yeah, as you can imagine, things were pretty crazy. There was lockdowns. There was trying to understand this world. This idea of category creation. Technically, also, this is my first job, so understanding what it's like to be a manager and you're doing. I had no business experience. I came from waking up as a professional athlete, looking at my phone and seeing, okay, you've got strapping here, you got physio here, and you got to eat lunch here, and you're going to go to bed there, and everything was out there. And then now I'm doing that scheduling for other people, which is, I suppose there's a little bit of correspondence there. But what I really quickly found, and it took me a little while to get into the groove of this, but for me, the morning is kind of my sacred time. It really does, because once the day gets going, I find it personally hard to slow down during the day, which is why I feel if I set my morning up, it can, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter what potentially ends up happening back end of the day. And in startup guys like it, and the business is growing as quick as ours, like, there's just things that just pop up, and all of a sudden you'll be on a meeting after dinner, and so I can't, if I was to try and I tested this, if I was to try and set in time to exercise or meditate or even just take a moment in the afternoon, something would always come up and it would take a back seat. And I knew over time, and my wife was really cognizant of that for me. She said, Damien, you've got two things now that you need some quiet time in the morning. So I get up, and I also need to swim. So swimming for me is like meditation. Absolutely love it. I don't know what happens, but like I go for a swim now in the morning, and that's when all my marketing ideas come to me. Which I find isn't it unique? Like, marketing is such a creative concept, and to be able to get creative doing something you absolutely love doing in like a meditative state, I think says a lot about finding a form of exercise that you love and what that actually can do, for I suppose for your cognition as well. But for me, I get up really early. I try and get up around 5 a.m. And that first half an hour of the day, I literally just try and I go downstairs, leave the bedroom, and I'll try and just do a little bit of breath work. And not long. I mean, I'm talking kind of. I'll turn the coffee machine on, and I'll just sit down on the couch. And even 5 minutes for me sets me up really nicely. We've recently moved, so we've got a very small pool in our backyard. But I also enjoy, like, it's strange, but before I maybe head down to the lap pool, I might actually even jump, like I'll do some breath work, grab the coffee, and I'll jump in the pool to kind of wake up as well. I'll jump in the pool to wake up. It's very good, and if it's cold, if the temperature's down, the cold water really helps with the vagus nerve and that kind of stuff. And I'll do some kind of light running in the pool. And if I've kind of done my breath work, I've jumped in the pool, done a little bit of light running, that's maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and I'm just, I just feel $1 million. Then I can go and I'll try and get a good session in the pool. And by the time, my son wakes up and everyone's up and you get ready for the day and the daycare drop and all that stuff, I feel really centered and prepared for the day. So look, it's not groundbreaking, but that's me.
Yeah, it's so important that early time in the morning, I mean, there's studies around this, successful people, they're taking that time in the morning for themselves, not getting up and start slamming emails and returning texts and things like that. We're very similar, we've got a full day. Every day is an incredibly full day plus training. And that morning time, it's untouchable. Like, the world cannot touch that morning time for me. And it sets me up to be, a better person, better business person, better athlete throughout the day. But tell us about Oceanside. And as we're kind of like in this last 10 minutes or so of the podcast, we want to know about Oceanside, how the reception was. I was so psyched to meet you. I was so glad to be connected with you, Damien. And also I know that this was not available in the US before, but now we are able to get it through the feed. So tell us about start with Oceanside, and then tell us about what's going on in the US as far as our ability to get our hands on Pillar.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they intertwine with each other. There, obviously, I think any consumer brand in the world understands, you target where your biggest customer bases are, and the US endurance market is the biggest in the world. And for us, we had a plan and a dream to get to North America at one stage. I didn't anticipate it definitely being in April of 2023, put it that way. But it all kind of came about it was after Kona last year, which was really interesting. The founder and owner of the feed, Matt Johnson, he actually got his hand on the products. He actually his hand on some samples. We've got at the time we had some single serves, so kind of like that. That's kind of the formula. But like at the time we had some single serve sachets. And he got his hands on those at Kona, or going over to Kona. And he and his wife flew over Kona, and he tried the product that night. he told me the story. He was just blown away by how well he slept. So then he had it the second night. And so did his wife, and she had the same experience. And then by the third night, they'd run out. So he'd gone back to try and find whoever he was getting the product from, because he was like, I need to have some of this stuff for the way home. And again, like we hadn't met yet, and he then went back to Colorado, and they started obviously looking into the brand, looking into this space of micronutrition, and just said, wow, this is definitely something that North America, they obviously understand the North American consumer market, and they got in touch, which for me was a really interesting learning curve. I've loved learning from the feed. I think from a marketplace perspective, and even spending a week with their team after Oceanside, I've never experienced a retail. Let's call them a retailer. I call them a curated marketplace, but they are so dialed into what endurance athletes need. Like they have an entire coaching, like almost customer service area in their division, in their team, where people can write in and there are coaches ready and waiting to answer. And there are times, the interesting things, there are times where the coaches don't even talk about nutrition. They're just helping with like training plans. They said, we're kind of here for anything, but mainly if they want to talk about nutrition, you can talk about nutrition. To get it, to fast forward a little bit, obviously the plan was made that we would bring the product into North America exclusively with the feed, and we would start with our triple magnesium products. We then had to undertake the large process of FDA approval, relabeling, et cetera, et cetera. A lot goes into that. And so the plan was then, it was just really kind of serendipitous timing that it was looking like it was going to be end of March, early April. And we looked at the calendar, and we were like, wow, let's try and do the launch, in and around Oceanside, which was, for us, it was going to be, I thought, what a great opportunity to get some of our team over there. We can do an expo, the feed, we share some common professional athletes, and we can try and shoot, do a bit of a mini physical launch as well. And it was great. So that was how it went about. We planned it to go live the week before Oceanside. So then hopefully if anyone had seen the product on the feed, they could come and have a chat to the team. And it worked really, really, really well in that sense. We had Ben Canute racing together, who was fantastic and shot a lot of content for us on the day. And the launch and the response has been phenomenal. Much greater than my expectation was going to be, and even the feed thought. I think we're both very pleased with the direction it's going, and we obviously see that there is a huge amount of opportunity to start to help educate, and the feed are going to play a really important role in this. And that's one of the things that one of the reasons we decided to partner with them as part of Pillar's launch in North America is because of their focus on education. They don't just get product from A to B, which, well, they do that very well, but they're also really, really mindful of how to educate where to fit this new category into the world of an endurance athlete's, let's say, puzzle. Because they've got a lot of brands, they've got brands that essentially can all do similar things, but from a micronutrient perspective, they understand where this can really play a part. I think Matt, the founder, was also very aware that sleep right now is on the minds of so many people, particularly endurance athletes. I think he's very acutely aware that endurance athletes are the ones that are very sleep deprived, meaning that they know when and how much sleep they need. But if there is, if something does go wrong in that equation throughout a night, it really can throw off days of preparation, because we know that the meticulous planning that goes into kind of training and life scheduling for endurance athletes as well. And he said, if we are able to solve for that with Pillar and start to educate how something that is natural, it's a product that people can be safe and not worry about that they're using something that is far, that's more I suppose, in a way, pharmaceutical in a sense as well. It is micronutrition that, and magnesium is created naturally as well. So the only thing is humans can't create it. We have to get it from what we're eating. And unfortunately, we don't eat enough of certain things. So, Oceanside, though, what a great place. I absolutely love Southern California. Amazing race. I was pretty blown. Like I was blown away. I was blown away by the women's race. I mean, I could not believe Chelsea today. I thought Chelsea had it won. And running a 1:15, I was actually texting her coach Dan Plews, who I'm very close with, and I said, "Oh, how's she looking?" He said, and he literally said before the run, he said, "I think she runs a 1:15." He goes, "I think she'll run a 1:15." I went, "Okay, that should be enough to win." And it's like, Tamara just ran. It was a phenomenal run. But it was a great course, such a great course. Beautiful, beautiful weather. I can see why a lot of athletes do enjoy making that one the start of the season.
Yeah, it's like I know Ben calls it like a mini world championship. It really, and it's a spectacular course. We both raced it, which means we completely missed the pro race, but we can watch that.
Yeah.
And we've been in both places too. We've lived in Boulder, and now we're here in San Diego. So we've been blessed to be in both of these epic, endurance communities. And, even when we were in Boulder, people were like, if you like it here, you're going to love San Diego. You're just going to love it. And so we love both places. The communities are amazing. The endurance communities are like, that's how we got our birth in the sport was when we moved to Boulder. And just to be in this energy of greatness, there's so many high caliber athletes just training. We ran into Ben one day just running. He was walking. He was doing a walk on the run course, and we were running. So just running into these people, it's super cool. So Damien, what's the dream and vision for Pillar now that you've got your feet wet a little bit? 3 years in, you're in the US now. Like where do you see this going?
We definitely see a lot of white space in this idea of sports micronutrition. The goal, obviously, we want to, if we create this category, we want to lead the category. We want to be that almost a platform. We don't just want to be a product. We want to be a platform that athletes can turn to educate in this space. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on us as a company as well to make sure that we're not just creating great products, but we're finding ways to actually educate. And that comes through content, through the way that we can speak to our audiences as well. And for me, that's the ultimate goal. I want us to essentially change the mindset for athletes. And with that it's a pretty bold statement. But as we've said, I think there is something really, really close to my heart about trying to get, allowing people to have the possibility to do what they love doing for much longer. I think it's a unique space in nutrition because no one has thought, about really thinking about athletes who love doing what they want to do and potentially continue to do that well later into life, continue to do it with their children or their partners. We all know endurance sports is a lifestyle. So if we can play a part in that, in changing the mindset of an athlete very early on in their careers and then be able to allow them to do it for much longer, that is the goal. And I know there's 1,000 steps in between that, but the big element of what we've got to do is make sure that we're leading the way in product, which I'm confident that we're going to be doing. We've got some pretty exciting announcements coming in the coming months in terms of who'll be joining the business and the company from a research perspective as well, to really continue to take us forward from that perspective, to make sure that we are always at the forefront of innovation in this space. And we are already looking at kind of what the next steps and the next iterations of these products can be. And then after that, it's about engaging with our community. It's about trying to help people, move along that education curve. And that has nothing to do with product from my perspective. That has something completely to do with how you build a community and talk to people and think about, the content and communication element of what you're doing as well, aside from product. So 2 big things, but that's the goal. A few more early mornings, I think.
Yeah, a couple more early mornings, 1,000 steps, and then another 5,000 steps that you're not aware of yet. Those will come.
Totally.
But this has been a great conversation. I want to congratulate you on becoming a dad, and your wife nailed the branding. Like that's one of the things that I love about it. I'm like, this is classy branding. Clean. I really like it. It's very clean. Our backgrounds are in marketing, and nice. Like the brand matters. The way it looks, it matters to me, and it looks really good. And we got a chance to try the product at Oceanside and loved it. I feel like the guy from the feed. Like, where else can I get it? Need more. So we hopefully we can get more of that into our bodies soon, but. Really appreciate your time, Damien, coming to us from your home in Australia, and really excited to introduce or further introduce you to our community here at Yogi Triathlete. So thank you.
No, likewise, guys. I appreciate it. I know you guys do have a very loyal audience, so I appreciate the opportunity to chat today and obviously introduce myself and what we're doing here to them. So it's not lost on me as well. So thank you so much.